Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Robert Swartwood here. Tonight, I am joined by the award-winning author of three short story collections and five novels, including One of Us, which I have a copy here somewhere, which is coming out next week, in which Kirkus, in their star review, calls a sharp thriller as well as a magic trick, a novel that's both deeply unsettling and tenderhearted. That's right, it's your favorite writer of mine, Dan Shawn. Dan, how the heck are you?
I'm good. I'm good. Just I was gonna hold up a copy of the book and I realized I don't have a copy next to me either. So this
I
is
I have it here. I have a whole stack of your books for people who want to know. I mean, you have more
wow.
than this, but I have two of your short story collections, got three of your novels here. Of course, this is the new one. I have the
That's the
arc
new
of
one.
One of Us, which we're going to get into. Before we do that, I always like to kind of, jump back in time, kind of see where people come from, because, no writer's the same. We're all special snowflakes in our own way.
Exactly.
I was initially looking at your website, which you just told me in the green room is not even really your website. Before we get into that, can you talk about like when did this even come to your attention that just somebody is just creating a website for you?
Um, I actually one of my students said, Dan, do you have a website? And I was like, no. And they're like, well, yeah, you do, but I think it's fake because it's got this whole section where it's like Dan Shawn's School of Creative Writing. And it's like Dan Shawn had a brilliant idea and created a school of creative writing at Oberlin College. And I was like, I didn't create, it was there. I just taught there. But it's like clearly they like from like a country where they don't get that or understand what's going on. And it's a very complimentary website, but they get a lot of things wrong.
Yeah.
I don't know why they created it. Um, I don't know why they won't take it down or answer any of my queries. But it's just there permanently. It hasn't been updated in about 6 years. So neither of my two new books are on that website. But somehow, if you do a search, that's the first thing that comes up.
Yeah, no, absolutely. All right, well, that's so okay. So sometimes when people have like Wikipedias or whatever, I like to do kind of like a Rich Eisen celebrity true or false. So we'll do that here with this website that somebody else created for you that doesn't. Um, it says at a young age you were a huge fan of Ray Bradbury and that you were even started writing like imitation Bradbury stories. Is that accurate?
That is accurate. That's accurate. And I actually um, wrote a letter to Ray Bradbury, and he responded, and we had a correspondence that lasted pretty much all the way through high school.
Do you
So,
still
and
have those letters?
I do. I'll show you. I've got this on my wall. I don't know what there's too much glare maybe.
I see something though. Oh wow, that's really cool.
Yep,
Yeah, that's incredible.
1983. So, yeah, I mean, it was very formative for me because, to get that kind of feedback from somebody that you really cared about and whose work meant so much to you was like gave me the idea that maybe I could do this. And as a matter of fact, when I was writing the this new novel, which is a carnival novel. I dedicated the book to Bradbury, among other people,
Yeah.
because his carnival stuff was really formative for me and made me want to write about my own circus, carnival, sideshow place.
Y- Yeah, and again, we're definitely gonna get into the book, and you had your publisher had included. It was very nice. You wrote this letter to, I guess, booksellers and whoever else the arc was going out to, where you talk about is a love letter to Bradbury, Something Wicked This Way Comes, as well as many other things. And again, we're going to get
Right.
into that. So, what else were you reading at that time when you were reading Bradbury? Were there other authors, other things that were really
Yeah,
inspiring
I
you?
was I was a really big genre person. Mostly. high fantasy and horror. Peter Straub was a big person for me. Shirley Jackson, um, Tolkien, and C.S. Lewis, and yeah, I mean, I really read anything that had some kind of genre element, but particularly I liked horror um and serial killers because it was the 80s, you know.
Yeah.
You had to read
So
about
when did you start dabbling around to, like being creative? Like, do you remember the very first thing that you did that you would like say was truly yours on a creative level?
well, I mean, I think I've been making making stories for as long as I can remember. I grew up in this very small town in Nebraska, so I was the only kid in the town. It was about 20 people. Um, and I made comics and I made, this is sad. But I made a Dungeons and Dragons game that I played all the characters. So I was the DM and the players. Um, and I started writing stories kind of, I guess, as fan fiction. Because I loved Lord of the Rings and I loved Bradbury's stuff, and I would just sort of want more. So I would try to make up my own stories that took place in Middle Earth or took place in, one of Bradbury's worlds. I liked particularly his world that was kind of like the Addams family, where there were all these people who had different magical abilities and they lived together as a family. There's several stories by Bradbury that have that. I think the most famous of them is called Homecoming. But
Okay, yeah.
there are a bunch of them. And I love that world. And I guess this new book is kind of playing around with that idea of um, people with magic powers as well.
Yeah. So, yeah, I'm just looking at this website that's not your website, and I can see, I
Uh-huh.
don't know, there's a thing where it's professional writers are on standby 24/7 so they can assist you at any time, day and night. This essay writing service is to help you deal with all your academic hardships. Maybe that's the reason they have that
Oh,
in the
so it's an
background.
essay. I didn't see that. Maybe that must
There's a
be
thing
me.
it's on the it's on your like biography page about kind of like right under the education section. So maybe there. So when was the first thing you had like, the first time you wanted to try to get published? I mean, was that like a goal early on when you were reading these Bradbury stories where you saw Bradbury was getting published in these places? Like, I
Yeah.
mean, but there's a lot of those magazines that don't even exist anymore. Um,
No, I mean, as a matter of fact, Bradbury kind of coached me. I mean, he told me to go to the library and get Writer's Market. And, then he recommended that I send stuff to like Asimov's and, the magazine of science fiction and fantasy and things where I was completely unqualified to do so. But he's like, doesn't matter. You just need to get in the habit of sending your work out. Um,
yeah.
which is, sort of the exact opposite of what they told you in college, which is, you should not send your work out until it's absolutely the most polished thing ever. Um, so
No, I mean, send the work out and get used to rejection.
yeah,
I
I
feel
mean
like,
that
especially
was
probably for a lot of people, when they wait too long and they try to get, perfect it, then when those rejection letters start, flooding in, it hits harder than when you start really early and you're just used to it. It's like, this is part of the game.
yeah. I mean that was the thing is that, I think early on I did make it into a game, I'd send my like honest to God, I'd send my little like horror stories to the New Yorker, and they don't know. Somebody was reading Slush and was like, "Okay, here's a 14-year-old who's written a story about ghosts and vampires. I don't know what he's thinking, but rejection."
To be fair, though, the New Yorker does sometimes do some type of, quote unquote genre work, which I will talk a little bit about in terms of, and I mentioned this to you in the green room. One thing that I've always it's fascinated me about your career is like with Michael Chabon and like Ben Percy. I feel like you kind of came up more as a quote unquote literary author, but clearly
Hmm.
you had a love for genre, which you really started drifting towards at some point in your career where I feel like, you still write with a very literary sensibility, obviously, but you
Right.
really like are kind of like, you're not giving any Fs anymore. You're like, these are the stories I want to tell. I don't care if it's not, quote unquote, because I think like your very first novel would probably be considered straight up literary.
I think so. I think so. I mean, I guess the thing is that when I started in college, it was a different time period, but um, I remember getting the syllabus from my first creative writing class, and right there in the syllabus it said no genre fiction. So there was this like prejudice slash snobbery about it from an academic level. And I was just like, okay. And then, I started reading the stuff that was assigned, and I fell in love with people like Raymond Carver and, Dennis Johnson and so on and so forth. And, you know, I I went in that direction for a while. Um, but really one of the things that happened was that like the world of literary fiction just started to seem increasingly unfun to me. Um, my my second book was nominated for a National Book Award, sort of out of the blue. Nobody expected it at all.
And
And
that's this one,
that's
Among
Among
the
the Missing.
Missing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm like 35 years old. And it was the year that Jonathan Franzen's The Corrections came out, so it was not likely that I was going to win. But anyway, then I had this thing kind of hanging over me, and I felt like every time I sat down, I was like, well, is this a National Book Award winning sentence?
Mm.
And it started to feel like the whole literary game was just dragging me down and making me not want to write. And that was when it was around the same time that I was corresponding with Michael Chabon. And he was going to do this book for McSweeney's called McSweeney's. You probably have it. You do.
Yeah, because I
There
remember
it is.
speaking of Ben Percy, I was talking to Ben Percy, and he reminded me it was one of his favorites because at the same time, again, coming up from more, being literary, like being in the Paris Review and stuff, and
Right.
because we had talked too about how he kind of got into his love of genre, and he had mentioned that this anthology really, and I remember I happened to have it right there on this bookshelf. Yeah, yeah, Thrilling Tales.
Yeah, so anyway, I wrote a story for that, and I was like, I felt like it had freed me from something, and I was like, I think this is what I really need to do to be happy. I don't think that, chasing literary awards or having those hanging over my head is going to make me a happy writer. What is going to make me happy is sort of playing in all these genre fields that I loved when I was growing up, and that I still, that was still my go-to when I got in the car. When I would read an audiobook, it would always be a horror or fantasy book. Um, and so I just was like, this is what you should be doing. And it turned out that, sort of the cultural tide had begun to change a little bit. I mean, not just with Chabon, but with people like Kelly Link and Karen Russell and Kevin Brockmeyer, Ben, where, people were starting to say, I'm a genre writer, but that doesn't make me a shit writer.
No.
Because I think that was like often the two things got conjoined, right? Is like the genre writing was considered hack writing.
Yeah, unfortunately, and honestly, I think in some circles people still believe that. And I don't know, and
Yeah,
you
I
don't
mean, I think,
necessarily have.
but I hate those people.
Oh yeah, oh absolutely. And I mean, and that was something when I had talked to Ben, and he even said it on the record, so I feel comfortable even mentioning it here, where when he started making that pivot into doing more genre stuff, doing a lot of stuff with DC and Marvel with like comic books, he had some people in the quote unquote literary scene basically like pulling them inside and saying, "What are you doing? Like why are you doing this? You know, you're like going to ruin your career, like that type of
Right.
stuff." Did you ever get any like a pushback from anybody like that?
I very little. I mean, I would occasionally see like an Amazon or Goodreads review where they'd be like, "Oh, Dan Sean used to be da da da, but now he's turned into this, whatever." Um, but not from my agent or my editors, because honestly, once I started writing stuff that had like a genre infusion was when I started selling books.
Yeah, no, I definitely think there's some correlation there. Well, even like Among the Missing, I'm only about maybe halfway through this, so I've only read probably like three or four stories, but even, I won't say in quote unquote genre, but like they're a little weird, they're a little weird. There's a little
Yeah,
things
I mean
going on there.
they've got one toe in there and it's sort of like disguised. I think what it started out, I was using like the supernatural and crime and the eerie stuff as a metaphor for somebody's sad life, which is what all literary fiction is about. And then I was just like, why should it be a metaphor? Just make it a real killer. Make it, make it a real ghost.
Yeah.
So that's what I did. And I haven't looked back. I mean, one of the things that is my goal. We were talking about Stuart Onan and how like every book of his is different. But one of my goals is just to try to hit as many different genres in my lifetime as I can. So, this one's kind of like a circus western steampunk kind of novel, and I'm hoping that I can do um like a straight up uh well, as straight as I can be, a straight up like high fantasy book eventually. And I just want to play and I want to do spy, I want to do a spy book. I'm working on a spy book right now.
Ooh.
uh so yeah, the spies are very untrustworthy though.
Well, spies oftentimes are. That's true. Before we move on actually to the novels, let's talk a little bit just in terms of like short stories in general. Like I said, I had two of your collections here. I had the National Book Finalist, Among the Missing, and of course, Stay Awake, which is the most recent one. When you're putting together a collection,
Hmm.
what type of, I mean, obviously you're a fan of short stories, so I'm sure you read a lot of short stories. Like, and I'm sure you put in a lot of thought of, the placement of like, okay, like a short story collection should be a certain length. I mean, just is every short story collection you do you maybe approach it a little bit different in terms of how like maybe tone, like, what you want your first story to be, like what you want the very final story to be for the reader to kind of like finish on. Um, with the idea, I think sometimes that readers are going to read one, two, three, four the whole way through, where sometimes I find that readers will just also kind of jump around in terms of
No,
stories,
yeah,
what
I
they're
mean, I
reading.
know they don't, but I spend hours and hours and hours like with making charts and Excel spreadsheets where, like what will happen if it's this order? What will the reader's experience be? Um, and like the two short story collections that you have um are both sort of thematically linked stories. I mean, Among the Missing has missing people sort of scattered throughout it. And Stay Awake has like it's all about sort of um the supernatural infecting the ordinary life. And I have I have Stay Awake is arranged so that um every story that came before gets tagged in the last story.
Hmm.
I mean, nobody ever notices this, but all of the characters from every story in the book end up in that last story just briefly for a second. So it's like a Magnolia kind of thing.
Hmm.
Where there's like an ensemble of everybody that's had a story before.
So when you're putting together these collections, do you find yourself do you like going back to reread your old stuff, or do you find yourself hating it? Where sometimes you're like, ah, why'd I use that word? Or maybe I should have, done a different thing with this sentence.
Uh,
Like, I guess the
I
question is, when you're doing these short story collections, do you maybe like slightly tweak, are they as they were originally printed, or do you find yourself maybe kind of
oh
revising a little
no.
bit here and there?
No, I'm constantly editing, which is I guess one of the reasons I don't go back very often. But I mean, if I'm doing a reading, I'll be editing as I'm reading. I mean, I'll just be changing stuff as I go along, because it's just, um, I mean, I guess nothing is ever finished. You just have to kind of let it go. But my tendency is to always want to tweak and change words and um add little things. That's just sort of my nature.
Yeah. So, at what point? So, and again, on this website, that's not your website. They list that your very first novel was, is it "Remind Me of Me"? Is that
You remind
correct?
me of me.
Or you
Yes.
remind? Oh, yes, there it is. Was that your actual? Was that your actual first novel, or was it just your first published novel?
No, it was the first finished novel. I mean, I had tried to start before. I mean, it really I think if you've been working with short stories for a long time, and I did for, like I wrote exclusively short stories for 10 years, and then I got like a contract from Ballantine Random House, which was like, we'll publish this story collection if your next book is a novel. And I
Hmm.
was like, okay, I guess I have to do this. And I had a really incredible editor at Ballantine named Dan Smetanka, he's now at Counterpoint. Um, but I mean, this was back in the day where, you could talk to your editor like once a week or something, and he just basically walked me through the process of writing a novel. I would send him stuff chapter by chapter. He'd give me feedback, and then, he kind of taught me how to write a novel.
At that time,
So,
so you just really were very content writing short stories. Was that more of a Bradbury thing? Because Bradbury, of course, had written some novels, but primarily it was short stories. I mean, at that time, what was it? Just you didn't feel maybe you had it in you to write it? Because it is a lot of work, obviously. I mean, like a short story. How long does it typically take you? Obviously every short story is different, and some are longer than others. But when you're writing on a short story, how long from like beginning at least until that initial draft does that usually take you?
um, usually about a year.
Oh wow. I mean, and that's
I
like,
mean, what I have learned is that um, writing a novel is so much easier than writing a short story.
well, because I feel like with a short story, ideally there are no missteps because they're so short. You need to have
Right,
everything perfect because any little glaring misstep or error, a reader's going to notice it and it's going to cause. Whereas in a novel, it's so much longer. There's more going on.
right.
Yeah.
Well, the thing that I loved about short stories is that I would be working on like maybe 30 to 50 stories at once, and I would just cycle through them. I don't know, and then eventually one would finally come to its conclusion. It's not like I was working on the same story exclusively for a year.
Right.
But it would often take me a year to get through the whole process and through the revision process and whatever, while working on other stories at the same time. And um, you know, I think I didn't feel like I had the attention span to spend on like to do a whole full novel. Um, and I still worry about that. I mean, I'm a little more medicated now than I used to be. But anyway, I figured out that I could write a novel in a similar way if it was a multi-perspective novel, or if it had
Mhm.
like little chapters that I could work on, you know, in pieces. And so
Right.
that's what I tend to do. I tend not to, like start at the beginning and work all the way to the end. I tend to write lots of pieces and then in the second draft figure out where I need to fill in and where I need, connective tissue.
Yeah. Well, that kind of gets us a little ahead of, I guess, where I was initially going to ask it, but and I think I even mentioned in the green room, just on what I've read of your work, I get the sense that you are not somebody who sits down and plots out an outline from beginning to end before you sit down
Oh
and
no.
writing. Like you sit
Yeah.
down with a character, story idea, whatever, and just kind of go and see what happens. Is that correct?
Yeah, yeah. No, I mean, and that to me is the discovery part is the fun part. Initially, I mean, I can't imagine like if I wrote an outline, I just don't know whether I would want to continue because there's this, I have that idea that I'm exploring, and that I think one of the things that makes it attractive is that I don't know the solution yet. Um, I mean, the other thing I think is, like with this novel, with One of Us, I was, it does have a central, does have a central through line, but a lot of the things that really excited me about it was, that it was going to be multiple perspectives. I'd get to write, you know, from the point of view of different of the carnival performers, and get to explore each one of their perspectives, and that was like super fun for me.
Yeah.
And
Well,
then it's also fun to try to figure out how to put it into like a novel-like form, but that's what genre is for, right? Genre
yeah.
gives you a container that you know what beats you have to hit, right? And that container can kind of hold things together when otherwise it'd just be like a mishmash of different like little stories and stuff.
Yeah, and again, we are going to get a little bit more into it in a bit, but yeah, this part of this was almost like a chase novel where you have the two
Oh, it's
twins
absolutely
basically being chased by a psychopath or whatever,
right.
and then
Right.
so and that kind of in like in with them in the carnival. But again, we're gonna get more in that. But before we do that, let's talk a little bit about your teaching. So you did like at what point did you want to become a teacher, or was it one of those? And honestly, like so back in was it 2000? Shoot, 2000, the late 2000s or whatever. I had edited this anthology for W. Norton. At that time, I kind of felt like, oh, maybe I should try to go get my MBA. And I had the same conversation with one college in particular, where I was like, like, what are your thoughts on genre? Just because, again, that was
Hmm.
what I was reading at the time. Coming up, I mean, I write a lot more just straight up like thriller crime stuff now, but before I was really much, horror and reading Stephen King and everything else.
Right.
But
Right.
and ultimately, I decided not to really worry about getting my master's. But at what point did you, decide, okay, teaching would be a good profession to have while you were doing, while you were also writing at the same time?
Um, well, I mean, at the time that I went out and got an MFA, it was, like it was considered a legitimate career path. It's not so much anymore because the jobs are so limited and hard to find. And higher education falling apart, etc. But anyway, um, I guess part of it too was that um, you know, people that had meant a lot to me and that had made a huge mark on my life were my teachers, and I wanted to be able to do that too. Um, and I was teaching at Oberlin College for about 20 years, which is all undergrads. So I wasn't teaching at the MFA level. And in some ways, teaching undergrads, the stakes are a little lower because they don't necessarily think they're going to become writers. They're just doing it as an extracurricular, or they're doing it for fun a lot of times. And, um, they could surprise themselves. Whereas with, like you go into an MFA program and you're teaching, and there's a lot of, like, am I gonna when I need to publish my first book? Like that anxiety is sort of infused into the MFA program, and people have a hard time relaxing. Whereas, with undergrads, you can ask them to do really fun things and they'll play with it and they'll produce really crazy stuff. And it's great. Um, so yeah, I love teaching. I was glad to retire. At a certain point, 20 years seemed like enough, but I loved it when I was doing it.
Yeah. So, I guess when you were teaching, was there anything specifically you started to learn more about yourself as a writer as you were teaching, or any like vice versa, where you were kind of bringing things that you feel that being a writer and the stuff that you were writing kind of helped you as a teacher?
Um, yeah, I mean, I think, sort of learning what, like what makes a story and how to and like what I mean I think I learned a lot more about structure and plot because I was trying to explain it to students who really often didn't know like what made a story. And like once you try to explain that, then you're kind of figuring it out yourself. And I feel like um, as I was teaching, I was also learning how to, I'm sorry, that was not expected.
No, yeah, take your time.
All right, got it. Um, I lost the thread, but anyway,
Well,
yeah,
no, just you were saying that it in terms of like it was I believe teaching kind of helped you learn in terms about structure and plot.
yeah, in particular, but also, just, um, I don't know, a lot of times when you're in college, or, even into your 20s, you think my life is fascinating. I I feel like I'm in a movie about college students. And then, for me, it was so not fascinating because, the college stories are generally pretty boring. And, they're insular and nothing much happens. People go to a party, they drink and then they feel sad. That's kind of the whole thing. Or, they meet somebody, nothing happens, and then they feel
So
sad.
so were you encouraging like genre writing in your classes or
Yeah, I mean, I'm not necessarily genre writing, but I was sure encouraging, let's not write about college. Let's write about something happening that has stakes. Um, and that's still my issue with um, a lot of contemporary fiction is, you know, I really don't want to read about the life of a lonely, like kind of sexless writer who's sad.
right? So
There's a
what
lot of it.
were there certain stories or novels that you had on your syllabus that you would always kind of have to go to that you really wanted your students to read to feel inspired or to at least get a good sense of what you felt was like
Oh,
a great
yeah,
story?
yeah, so many, a ton. Um, I like to teach. There's a this is just sort of a, like, Um, I like to teach this story called "Mary Go Sorry" by Carrie Holiday. I think it's one of the most brilliant stories of the last 50 years. Um, you probably haven't heard of Carrie Holiday. That's fine. You should read that story. Um, it's sort of based on the West Memphis 3 trial. Do you know of that trial?
Yeah.
It was those teenage guys that were accused of killing three little boys in West Memphis, and it was a trial that was infused by the satanic panic of that time period. And It's an amazing story, and is it's probably the most insane point of view story I've ever read because it's got like 50 or 60 point of view characters in like a 25-page story. It
Hmm.
just like it just like goes through point of view characters like you can't believe she could do something like this. It's astonishing. Um, Another story that I like to teach is this story by Kevin Brockmeyer called The Ceiling. Um,
Hmm. Yep.
do you know that story?
Yeah,
Um,
I know I've read it off the top of my head. I can't remember what it's about, but I know I've definitely read it.
it's about one day something starts lowering from the sky. Nobody knows what it is, but it just
Hmm.
keeps going down and down. And I was like, I love to teach it because I'm like, okay, so this is what plot is. The plot is a ceiling lowering onto your characters. And the hilarious thing about the story is even as the world is ending, like literally it's closing down on top of them, they're still like worried about like you know their petty problems. Um the main narrator's like worried about his wife having an affair, and like at some point the ceiling has lowered so that they don't everybody can only crawl around, but he's still like crawling around um the table, um, like watching his wife talk to this neighbor that he thinks she might be having an affair with. And it's just like, yep, that makes sense. That's how the world ends. You're just
Um,
paying attention.
I was at BoucherCon last year, and Dennis Lee Hain was one of the guests, and I remember he had made this comment. I remember writing it down, and we were talking about story and plot. So I just pulled it up to see if you would agree, because I thought it was very interesting. Because for me, it's one of those things where as a writer, I don't really think about it. I just do it, if that makes
Hmm.
sense. Where as opposed to, I know that like for some people that may be like, well, what it's about or anything else. But he said the plot's the car, the story is the journey.
Mm.
And I don't know what your thoughts were, if you would agree with that. The
I don't
plot
know
is the
whether I
car, the
understand the
story is the
metaphor.
journey. I mean, obviously it was in context with something else, but that was something that I remember sticking out. I remember like, typing it on my
Yeah,
phone.
I mean, I like it. I just don't. Like. I don't know that I understand the distinction between plot and story.
Yeah. Well, I think it was that idea of what was it? Shoot, hold on a second. Let me look something up real quick because I remember when I did my anthology with Norton, it was called the Hint Fiction Anthology. Basically, it was taking off that idea of the Hemingway six-word story. So we were looking at stories in 25 words or fewer. And actually, going back to Stewart and Nan had suggested something for the epigraph that talked about plot and story. Now I cannot, of course, find it here. Come on, where are you? But yeah, so because again, for me, it's one of those things like I never really think about it. I just do it. But this was, oh, here we go. So I'm just looking on the look inside on Amazon if I can find it. Ah, man. Of course, my computer's being slow. As I look that up, were there any other stories that really stick out between these two? And I did jot down that one story. Definitely want to check it out.
Yeah. Now I feel like I'm put. Well, another one that I like to teach, and is that I think is really interesting is this Michael Ondaatje story called Seven or Eight Things uh God, Seven or Eight Things I Know About Her, I guess. But it's just this really short flash that is like in seven parts, and it's just little like seven little scenes or images about this woman. And what I did was I kind of like overanalyzed it and broke it down into like what each piece is doing. And then I would have the students kind of try to imitate that story. And it seemed like it opened up something for them in a really interesting way. Seven or Eight Things I Know About Her. Um, Really good story and really useful as a teaching tool. which is, you know, that's an extra thing.
Yeah. Let me see here. So the
Did you find anything?
epigraph, do I have the epigraph here? Come on. Stupid, stupid book. Oh, uh, no, of course not. Anyway, it's not coming up, but I have no idea where the book is to look at it. Actually, let me see the Kindle edition.
Don't you have like a shelf that is just exclusively books that you've edited and stuff?
Not really.
Man, I have like a shrine. I leave
Do I
fruit
have?
at the base of it every day.
But basically, it was the idea of the king is dead, his story, the king died of whatever his plot, or something like that. It was that idea of
Okay, yeah,
like,
yeah, I know that. I know that one. It's like, yeah, the king died and then the queen died is a story, but the king died and the queen died of
s-
grief. It's
yeah,
something like
something like that.
we're both getting it wrong, but
Yeah. Yeah, we're both getting wrong. It's not even worth talking about. But let's go on to when you talk about satanic panic, let's talk about ill will.
okay.
So is this probably your longest novel to date?
It is. It is. And it started out and it was even longer, but my editor put a stop to that. Um,
Like when you're writing, do you typically have at some point do you have like an ending in sight where you realize, okay, I know where this story's
yeah,
going, this is where we're gonna be. Or there are times where then you might get to that place and you're like, oh shoot, I need to keep going. There's more to tell.
right. Well, I mean, I typically like by the halfway point have an idea of where the book is going to end. I'm not always right.
Yeah.
Um, but I have an idea and I have something that I'm shooting for. Um, I would say that 9 times out of 10, I'll be like, you guys, wait till you read the end. You're gonna be blown away. And people will be looking at it and be like, Dan, this doesn't make any sense. I'm like, really? But it's great, isn't it? They're like, Dan, you need to explain a lot more. And I'm like, oh, explaining. I hate explaining.
Yeah, I mean, I don't necessarily agree. I think sometimes open-ended is fine if like at least the clues in the text are there, so people can really, get at what it is. But
I
what's
know.
what I find interesting about Ill Will in particular is, and this goes back to I think we talked before about in terms of short stories, even in certain parts where we're in someone's point of view, and you have little short chapters, and they're more like little scenes.
Hmm.
You like it's not like it could all be probably fit together as one big chapter with no breaks, but you're breaking it up kind of a little bit scenes, like maybe even little
Hmm.
scenes like it ends on. So the character will say, "Well, let me show you." And then we
Hmm.
go, chapter 5, and then it will be whatever else. I'm assuming that was something very conscious that you were doing where you just wanted to kind of maybe is that more to just kind of keep the reader going because we always find that shorter chapters help or like what's
Yeah.
the thought
Well, I mean,
process behind that?
it was actually the way that I started writing. And I can't remember who told me this. I mean, it might have been, something Hemingway advised or somebody like that. I don't know. But anyway, like never always end your writing session on a cliffhanger.
Mhm.
And so never go to bed with the chapter finished. Always, you know, leave leave it in the middle. So one of the things that happened was I started doing that, and like a lot of the chapters would end in the middle of a sentence, and I was like, oh, I like this effect. It's really cool. And so I started just doing these things where like the chapter would end in the middle of a sentence and then it would just move to another character. And I liked that sort of because it started to give the book this feeling of like eerie disjointedness that I thought really gave us insight into the main character, who
Yeah.
was a guy who was really basically losing his mind as the book went on, and but also he was a psychologist, and so he kept pretending that he wasn't losing his mind because there's nobody more crazy than a psychologist. Um,
Well, what I want to ask you regarding point of view, like with Ill Will, you have, like you mentioned, a lot of different characters from different point of view,
yeah.
and in One of Us, you do as well. But that book essentially is all written in third person, so we're not doing necessarily a first person point of view. In Ill Will, you have a couple different sections from different point of view or first person point of views. When you're doing that, do you like how are you trying to kind of keep the voice different, or do you try to write those specifically one first person point of views in maybe even like a different style so that they stay some type of distinct, or is that something that you don't really think about?
Well, I mean, I, the two first person point of view, I think there's more than that, but they all just came out very distinct. Dustin has a really peculiar way of speaking. Aaron, his son, is like has a very particular way of thinking, and I think, like all of the characters came to me as almost like I was I was embodying them or I was acting them out. And so that their voices just seemed pretty naturally to sort of become distinct.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know. To me, there is an element with a lot of especially when I'm doing multiple point of view. But also with Sleepwalk, which is a single point of view, but very performative point of view. I mean, there's an element where there is this active embodiment or this active, like becoming a character while you're working.
Mhm.
That I really like. I mean, when I was a kid, I kind of wanted to be both an actor and a, a writer. Um, but turns out I couldn't act very well. Um, so I have to save that for my own private life and act things out in
Yeah.
my study, in my office. Do you do that? Do you act out
There are
in the
times where
office?
if and I don't really do it as much anymore, but sometimes if I'm coming up with like a certain type of action sequence, or if it's like a hand to hand combat type thing, I might try to see, is this something that's even viable, that's realistic, if a character does this or this. And I remember one time I had this book set up where it was these characters were in a very tight space, and I had them kind of mapped out where I felt they needed to go. And I remember my editor at the time was, for whatever reason, wanted to kind of push back and say it doesn't really matter. The reader doesn't
Hmm.
even like the reader is not sitting down and mapping out where they feel each character is. They just know that these characters are in a scene.
Hmm.
Here's a door. Here's like someone with a gun. Like you're really overthinking. I don't know about you, but sometimes I will really overthink sometimes some of these scenes where I know that the normal
Yeah.
reader doesn't even notice or care.
And sometimes, I mean, there are readers who care, like I cannot tell you every time I have a gun in a book, somebody somebody who loves guns is going to write to me and tell me how all the things that I got wrong. I don't know whether this happens to you, but
Oh yeah, no, you do not want to mess up any type of, yes, the caliber, the type of bullet. You have to make sure if you're going to put a gun in your story or your book, you have to make sure everything is completely correct.
yes, I mean, because that's the only reason they'll give you. I like the book otherwise, but he got the gun wrong. 1 star. Um,
Well,
but
I don't want to take much more of your time about Ill Will, but what you do this thing, I think you said you started doing it maybe in Ill Will, and I see that you also do it in One of Us, where and I actually just happened to pull because I'm actually listening to the audiobook. I think I have another like hour and a half of Ill Will left, which there's
uh-huh.
again a lot of different narrators that the publisher used because you have a lot of different points of view. Um, and so, of course, listening to it, you don't actually hear this, but visually, you do these things where I don't know if anybody can see it, but like the
Yeah.
text, you kind of break up almost like verse, or like you kind of have extra space.
Yep.
is this something? Can you talk about like kind of the thinking about that? Because again, in One of Us, you also do it, but you don't really do it as much. It looks like,
No, not I'm not
but like
not
it
very
does
much.
happen. Like why? Like where did that come from? That
I
idea?
guess it came from being jealous of poets. Because I really like I like the line break, and I like
Mm.
the idea of the space of the page, um, and the way that that can really affect a reader's experience of the words themselves. Um, Mark Danielewski is also somebody that has done a lot with, just sort of messing with text form, and I think his work is like has been influential to me
Yeah.
in that way. I mean, I love stuff that's playful like that. And I think to me it's some readers hate it, but to me it really enhances something when there's just some elements that are making you like think about the word sets not just as paragraphs but as images and as things on a page that make sounds.
Yeah, so I want to talk a little bit real quick about Sleepwalk. I read
Sure.
this when it first came out, what, 2022. So
Yes.
it's been a couple years. So, and I'm just kind of paging through really quick, and there's a connection between this and One of Us, correct?
Yes, there is.
Because I just happened to see one of the chapter titles, and it's a character, or at least the last name is a character of somebody that plays in there. Can you talk a little bit about, I guess, Sleepwalk? Because this is a crazy book.
Right.
Um, can you talk a little bit about kind of like the seed of this and then how that plays in, or like what the connection is? And we'll get into the new one, One of Us.
Okay, so the Sleepwalk is a book about it sort of takes place in an alternate version of the United States that's slight well, I don't even want to say it. It's somewhat different than the current United States. Um, anyway, there's this guy who is a mercenary. He does little criminal jobs for a corporation called Value Standard Enterprises that is just sort of this octopus multinational corporation that um and anyway, he finds out at a certain point that in an earlier time when he made a sperm donation to a sperm bank, he ended up giving birth to or he didn't give birth, but he has hundreds of children through IVF. And this one child uh, contacts him and tells him that she's in danger and she needs his help. And he begins to like uncover all this stuff about his own past and about what's been going on with this group that is using um, these IVF children to, I mean, it's like very conspiratorial and so on and so forth. Anyway, at some point he finds out that his father was this guy Harlan Jingling, who was a cult leader, and then Harlan Jingling shows up in One of Us as the ringmaster of the circus. So this is before he became a cult leader. He was just a circus ringmaster. But anyway, he's not a major character in the new book, but he's in there for sure. And he's so there's a little bit of a connection. I think you're maybe the only person that's ever noticed this.
I mean, the new book hasn't even come out yet, so I'm sure
Right,
people
right,
would
right.
notice. But I was so like, was that something initially? At what point, I guess, when you were writing Sleepwalk, did you start having the seed for what the next book was going to be for One of Us? I mean, was it a conscious decision, or was it maybe when you were writing One of Us, you were like, oh, maybe I could somehow connect these two?
I think it was, I mean, I know that these two books were the proposals were simultaneous. So I didn't know that they were connected when I proposed them. But there was a certain point after I finished Sleepwalk that I knew that I was gonna fold in a little bit of Sleepwalk into the new book.
Mm.
So I don't we talked about this earlier, but I've tended in my career to sell books based on, just proposals, so I don't really know how what's going to happen until I start writing them.
Yeah.
But I have a kind of outline that I give the publishers. Um, and then I just throw away the outline and start writing whatever I feel like.
I love it. So yeah, no, I mean, people definitely should check out Sleep. I mean, people obviously should check out all of your books, including the new one, One of Us, which is coming out next week.
That is correct.
We talked, I mean, we talked a little bit about it here and there. I mentioned this letter that you had sent. You had said before, part of the novel, again, was a love letter to Ray Bradbury's Something Wicked This Way Comes, Todd Browning's seminal 1932 film Freaks, and also his lesser known circus themed silent films, such as The Unknown and The Holy Three. You said you may find a touch of Catherine Dunn's Geek Love, a smidgen of Portis's True Grit, a dash of Charles Laughton's A Night of the Hunter, a lingering whiff of William Lindsay Gresham's Nightmare Alley, and maybe a little bit of Sherwood Anderson and Willa Cather. It's a tribute to all the stuff that I love and that made me want to write in the first place. And then you say, but of course, it's personal too. It's not exactly autofiction, but it does delve into a lot of the themes I've been obsessed with over the years: adoption, concepts of family, self invention, self deception, fate, and free will. Um, Besides that, so I mean, I kind of like just set it up there on the tee. What else can you tell us about the book?
Um, Well, I can give you the beginning. It's about a pair of twins who have very minor uh psychic powers. They can read each other's minds, but they're not even sure if that's real or not. But anyway, their father's been missing for years. Their mother dies. They're left orphaned, and suddenly this guy shows up who says that he's their uncle and he wants to take them away. And turns out that he's not their uncle. He's a serial killing psychopath who did know their father and believes that they may be used as to help him in his con game because they have these psychic powers. Um, anyway, the kids escape to the circus, and the the guy pursues them, and it's about their relationship. It's about the what the circus means in American culture, and it's an adventure story. The kind of adventure story that we've been telling ourselves in America for a long time. Like, I want to run away from the circus. I want to leave my mundane life behind. Kansas, goodbye. Um, but also, what happens when you run away to the circus is that you're not part of the mainstream anymore, and so then you're shut out from all of these from ordinary life. I feel like that's a big tension, right? I mean, we want to be special. We want to be like we want to leave our mundane lives behind, but we also want to belong, and we don't want to be outsiders. So there's those two things pulling against the twins, and they kind of go in different directions, if that makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah, and I guess I'm sure you've done short stories that have taken place in the past, but would we say this is probably your very first delve into at least a novel length? I guess we would call it historical fiction. I mean, it takes place in
I would call it
1915.
historical fiction, yes. I mean, it does have supernatural elements, so it's not straight up
Yeah, I mean, as
truth.
as has I think been the case with a lot of your more recent novels, it's a mixture of a lot of different things. You mentioned, it's you could say it's even like a serial killer thriller. It's a chase novel.
It's a chase
You
novel. It's
have
got Western elements.
yeah,
So yeah.
absolutely. So when you're writing historical, set in a time period that's over 100 years ago, like do you like to research? I mean, like, or is that like you don't really want the research to get in the way? I mean, like, how much research were
Right.
you really doing to kind of make sure at least it felt real in that time period?
I mean, I did enough research to to feel like I could make a scene believable, right? I mean, but I didn't feel like I had to read like 20,000 books about 1915. I mean,
Yeah,
there were certain things that I read a lot about. I mean, the story features the orphan trains. I read a lot about that. I read a lot about sideshows and vaudeville, and um, about sort of the situation of, people with differences. I mean, this was a time when the eugenics movement was really gaining steam, and so I wanted that to be a part of the book. And I wrote a lot about different aspects of American culture that maybe we don't think about anymore, like the Chinese Exclusion Act and some of these element and some of the like labor movement stuff that was going on, child labor laws, etc. But all of that, just kind of it was like as it came along, and then um, you know we're talking about a time when there's a huge amount of technological change. So I wanted to to think about like, okay, well, will people be driving here, or will they still be riding horses? Will they have access to phones? Will they have seen movies? Um, and like all of those things became part of like the texture of the book, but I would just do the research as needed, like um somebody's typing on a typewriter and I need to figure out what kind of typewriter they've got
yeah.
or if they have a typewriter.
Right. And so obviously I guess we would say like the main characters are of course the twins, Eleanor and Bolt.
Yep.
They when they get to the circus, the sideshow circus aspect, what's interesting is, and again, we're not really giving any like spoiler alerts here,
No.
but um, obviously the circus has a bunch of, for lack of a better word, freaks in the show.
Hmm.
Um, these are more than just like a tertiary characters. I mean, you actually like almost like in between some chapters really kind of go in and kind of give us some like history about was that like intentional from the very beginning, or is that something like as you were writing, you really wanted to kind of more delve into these other like, freak characters?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't want them to be tertiary characters. Because I wanted this to feel like a community, and I wanted it to feel like each character was an individual. They weren't just sort of like that they had some volition of their own and that they weren't just, like sideshow exhibits. Because I think that's a lot of times we think of people as, like these objects that we're viewing, and we don't think about their interior lives and what was going on. And I mean, one of my main interests in doing research was to read about the lives of people who made their living as sideshow performers, and to kind of try to get a sense of what their daily life was like and what their what they were thinking and feeling.
Yeah. Were there some sideshow characters that you initially thought you were going to include, like certain, traits that ultimately did not really make the cut?
Yeah, well, I mean, I was trying to hit all of the classic ones. There's a clown, there's a contortionist, there's a hypnotist, there's a little person, um, there's a guy who can pound nails into his head. Um, I suppose the there weren't any that I felt bad about not including. Um, like there's generally sort of a representative of each of the like specific sideshow types. that were popular at the time, more or
Yeah.
less. There's not a there's not a lion tamer, but there is a gorilla show. So I feel like that kind of covers it.
Yeah. Um, did you, so you said you did research. I mean, pe people I think are aware very much of the idea of these sideshow circuses.
Hmm.
Do you like how did they come about? What was that something strictly like America or like were those also like in other
Oh, I think
countries?
it was, I mean, it was like displaying people with, with unusual qualities or people who could do unusual things is very, very old. I mean, it certainly was going on in the in Roman times. Um, I think um, and it, I mean, it still continues today to some extent in reality TV and YouTube and so on and so forth. But
And there's
um,
some museums or stuff that might have, I think there's even
right,
one down towards Philly that has, like
right, the Motor
dead,
Museum,
yeah,
yeah. Um, but I think that the vaudeville circuit and the um, traveling sideshow circuit became more of a thing as traveling around the country became easier, either by train in the beginning, starting in the 1860s, or eventually by car. Um, and so then and there were ways to get around that were fairly easy. You could visit a region and sort of make a pretty decent living going from small town to small town. um, People, like to be entertained. They want to go see they want to go see something. Um, and it was a pretty decent business.
yeah. Another geeky writer question. This is primarily written in third person present tense.
Hmm.
When you're approaching, especially I guess short stories can vary, but like especially with a novel where you're going to be a very long narrative. Is that something that you just it feels natural, like from the jump, or are there times where you might start in third person past tense, and then after a couple pages or chapters, you realize maybe this is going to be
Yeah.
better
Well,
in
and
present.
I have a hard time because I tend to slip into first person, right, or slip into present tense when I'm first writing. In part because I think of scenes in kind of cinematic terms, so I'm picturing them as they happen, and so using present tense is my natural go-to. Um, and I like it. I know some people don't love it, and um, but it is sort of like my natural go-to. I mean, Sleepwalk was in first person present tense. This is primarily in third person present tense.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, it just seems to be my natural tense.
I think across the board, it's becoming much more used. I feel like for a time you were seeing a lot more past tense in
Hmm.
fiction. Even a lot of more recent Stephen King novels are third person present tense. I mean, he really uses the present tense more so than he ever did before. So it is something that just I don't know if it's something I can't imagine it's like the culture, but for whatever reason, that seems to be more and more people are using the present tense. And again, yeah, there's some readers who will give who'll give pushback on it, but it is what it is. I mean, I think whatever best serves the story, obviously, and the characters.
Yeah.
Um, so I just wanted to ask real quick, and this doesn't really give anything away because it's literally like the first chapter. We open. Was this first? I don't want to, I guess, go into it because again, when people read the book, they're going to see it's going to be the very first thing. Did you always know this was going to be a first chapter, or is this something that as you were writing, you realized, oh,
No.
we
It
could
was
add this
actually
little thing in here, kind of as a little like prologue in a way.
right. It was actually one of the last things that I wrote was that little first chapter.
I had a
Um,
sense. I had a felt like
you
that. I
had
was
a
like,
sense,
"There's
yeah.
yeah,
But I mean, I think what it was is that it was like um in the original draft, it sort of like um took maybe 30 or more pages to get for them to get to the carnival. Um and I thought I need to make people aware that this is coming and that this stuff is, because otherwise I felt like there wasn't enough sort of forward movement in those early chapters that gave the reader a sense of direction. And I think that's always important to me, to kind of start with something that gives readers something to look for and to wait for.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. No, it works really well. So, obviously this comes out next. I did
Tuesday.
want to ask you real quick, because you said that you were someone who just constantly, just writing. I mean, I'm like when you're working on a novel. Obviously you have a deadline, which I find, at least personally, is helpful
I
because it
love that.
basically gives you like you have to stop it at a certain point. But how many drafts do you end up going through on a novel where you just like, like yeah, I mean, just because again, like you said, I mean, you could just kind of keep going through again and again and again
It
and
it
revising.
varies. It varies, but I mean, I think this had probably four big rewrites, and then you know, another four or five where it was like I was responding specifically to editorial issues, or like my own readers would give me feedback and I'd be responding to things that they said. So, like I usually start out and I write the first draft in longhand in
Oh,
notebooks. Um, and then and I don't usually show that part to anybody. And then I type it in to, my word processing program of choice, or not. But the word processing program that everybody uses, um, fuck you, Microsoft. I hate it. But I do use it. I type it in, then I start showing it to people. Then I start like once I've typed it in, I can start to see where there are gaps and stuff, and where it needs to be filled in, or it needs to be, given more of a shape or whatever. And then I start doing that, and then as start getting feedback, I'll also start to revise according to intelligent things that my sister says, or things that my editor has lifted an eyebrow over, or whatever. You know how that is.
yeah.
Um, and you know, I'd say it takes probably six passes, then plus, like later little teeny things. Is that about what
Yeah,
it
I
is
mean,
for you?
so when you're writing longhand, do you like does it hurt? I mean, I know, like, I mean, like, how, I guess, how long is a writing session? Because sometimes for individuals, they'll sit down and at a computer and they'll, like, try to knock out 1,000 words or whatever. Clearly, you can't really tell that when you're writing longhand. I mean, like, how much are you trying to get through, or does that vary just day by day? Or you like
It
trying to do
varies
like
day
maybe a
by day.
scene at a
I
time?
do timed writing. And so I try to write without stopping for like like half an hour, take a 10-minute break, then another half hour. And I do that, like throughout the day with, with breaks. And I'll show you what a page would look like. I use this is like I use these notebooks that have columns in them. I don't know whether you can see this, but it's like so
Okay, yeah.
I use it like I just, um will, just fill these up, and I'm not really thinking about page count.
Hmm.
Um but um it always turns out that I have more than I need.
So you're somebody
I've
who
never lacked.
mostly, when you're going through your drafts, you are. you're cutting out as opposed to maybe like adding in as you're going?
Um, a little of both because, like I said, I don't necessarily write in chronological order. So sometimes it's like stuff where I need to fill in elements so to connect one piece to another. Other times it's like I wrote a chapter that really doesn't belong in the book. It's I enjoyed it, but it doesn't have any place in the plot.
Yeah.
And that was one of the things that was a little sad for me is that I wrote a lot of these little side chapters from the points of view of different performers. And some of them were just never made the cut because they didn't fill in any need of the plot. So they just
Well,
by the wayside.
so here's my 2 cents for that. Maybe when the paperback comes out, you have a little like kind of like DVD extras in the back.
Yeah, I know. I
Some like
want to
deleted
do that.
chapters.
I want to do that.
There you go.
They
You
let me.
I'll have my people talk to your people about my cut from
Okay.
that, and that works. So, all right. So, obviously, the new book is One of Us. This comes out next week, and
Next
then you're
week,
going on tour, correct?
I am going on tour. I'll be in Chicago, Minneapolis, Kansas City, Detroit, New York City, Vancouver, Washington, which is outside of Portland, and Los Angeles, Austin, Texas, and Miami, all stretched out over between next week and end of November. So
Okay.
I'll be all over the place.
Yeah, and obviously, if people want to find your tour schedule, they should not go to the website
Do not go to
danshawn
the
because that is
danshot.com.
a fake
Stay away
website.
from
So,
that.
if they want to stalk you online, where's the best place to find and then find those tour dates?
Um, it'll be posted on Instagram, Blue Sky, Facebook, and on my Tumblr page.
Good. You still have a Tumblr page?
I still have a Tumblr page. Tumblr was one of my things. I loved Tumblr, and I didn't want to let it go. Um,
What do you tumble over there?
I just like post weird things that I find online,
Okay.
and it's just like a scrapbook,
Yeah.
a little
All right. Well,
blog
people. All
scrapbook.
right. Well, if anybody who watches this learns one thing, it's that Dan still has a Tumblr page, and you should be following him on
Right,
Tumblr.
right. I still had a MySpace page up until they unceremoniously folded.
All right. So the time. I mean, actually, we have gone over. So thank you so much for being generous with your time. But real quick, is there anything that you've read recently, have watched, listened to that you would recommend that you enjoyed?
Um, You know what? This is weird. But I was watched the new season of Dexter Resurrection, and I
It's
went back.
great, isn't it?
It's great. And then I was sort of inspired to go back, and I'm like really enjoying that. Although I haven't watched them in whatever how long it is, 15 years or whatever, but I'm really enjoying it. It's pretty fun.
Yeah, I had watched the last season. What was it? Reborn, and then and then how that ended, and then I'm like, then I was like, they're bringing it back, and I had no interest. A friend of mine told me he was like, you got to watch this. This is great, and yeah, I ended up binging it right up until the end
I
because
know,
I ended up getting
I was
into
very
it.
suspicious, but like it's such a fun cast, and they have such a good time with that, with the, sort of Dexter tropes that they upend a little bit. Um,
I think it ends really. I mean, I guess they're doing another season or two, but I think it would be perfect to end the way it ends.
oh yeah, I do too. I do too.
Well, and then
Um,
what about reading wise? Is there anything that you'd recommend?
um, let's see. Well, I just finished the Stephen Graham Jones's The Buffalo Hunter,
Yeah,
which I loved. And there's a new Joe Abercrombie book. If you are a
The Devils.
reader, The Devils is really delightful. One of his better ones.
Very
So
good. So, all right, again, the new book, One of Us, is going to be bookstores everywhere next week. Dan is going to be going all over the place on tour. So if you're in the in those towns, those cities, make sure you go stop by and see him. And Dan, again, thank you so much. It was a pleasure finally doing this. And
Yeah,
yeah, everybody go check out all of Dan's work, all of his short stories. There's a lot out there, and I think you said before that you might have a new short story collection, hopefully coming out some point in the future. But we'll talk about that another time.
yeah. All right, man.
So, all right. So thanks again to everybody, and we'll see you all next time. Bye.
Bye.